Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. In this video I sit down with Rishu Saxena, who's the field CTO at the Snowflake offices here in Sydney and looks after the APAC region for Snowflake. In this particular video we discuss Snowpark, specifically around the AI ML workloads. Big hot topic at the moment. We discuss use cases, we discuss what Snowpark is, so if you're not familiar with it, stay tuned so Rishu can explain that to you in terms that you're going to be able to easily grasp and understand. And finally, stay tuned to the end of the video where Rishu gives us a quick whistle-stop tour of what Snowpark looks like and how you use it within a Jupyter notebook. My name's Adam Morton and I've written a couple of books on Snowflake. I've also been lucky enough to speak in front of my peers on a number of occasions. I've lived and worked in the UK, Europe and Australia during my career, and today I'm on a mission to help as many people as I can fulfill their career potential by adding as much value as I can around data strategy and modern cloud data platforms. Hi Rishu, welcome to having a quick chat with me today. And Rishu, if you don't know, is the data platform architect. As part of the field CTO office at Snowflake and based here in Sydney. Rishu, really appreciate you making the time to have a chat, and I'm keen to discuss the current features and functionality around the AI ML workloads, including Snowpark. We might touch upon native apps, but everything that we want to discuss today, I think, is going to be in the general availability kind of aspect, available to customers today. I think it'll be great with Summit coming up as well very soon, to maybe do a follow-up as well, and just to talk about how Snowflake's starting to mature in this space as well with some of the new announcements that come up in Summit. It'd be great to do a follow-up after this as well. So listen, really great to have you here. And it'd be awesome if you could just give a little introduction about yourself, what your role actually entails within the CT office at Snowflake today.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me here. Quick introduction, and thank you for introducing me as well. I am part of field CTO organization here at Snowflake. As you mentioned, I look after APJ region, and I focus on data science and data engineering workloads, part of a global team. About me, close to 2 decades of experience in the space, in data space. I've done my master's in data science from Sydney Uni. While I was actually at Cloudera, that was one of the best things. So much fun.
Yeah, especially at that time, right? I think that was probably quite new. Big data was new and the buzzwords there, so it's probably quite exciting to do it then.
Also, I have no freaking idea why I decided to do that. At that time, it was probably the worst time of my life. I had a little kid come.
Oh, wow.
My first son was like, what, less than a year old. I have no idea what I was thinking, but
You did it. You've got it now.
Yes.
That's all good.
Oh, yeah. Look, data science and data engineering is what I kind of focus on, as I mentioned, right? So we do have a wider team. We focus on verticals and horizontals. But yeah, no, happy to be here, and let's deep dive into this topic. It's something which in my opinion, I think this is one of those topics that are most misunderstood about Snowflake. Both internally and externally.
Okay.
Right? So,
Well, let's start there, Issue, right?
Yes.
What do you think are the top misconceptions that people have when it comes to that AI ML workload, when it comes to Snowflake specifically, do you think?
Yes. Oh, great question. So whenever somebody talks about AI ML or data science workload, right? Snowflake never says that we do AI ML workload. AI ML is very specific, but when you talk about data science is a much wider field, right? You're talking about creation, first of all, obviously acquisition of data, processing of data, manipulation of data. There's again, then specific kind of modeling that is required. So feature engineering, feature stores, and then only your AI or ML workload starts happening, right? So whenever we talk about data science, people directly jump onto notebook experience or AutoML or, hey, how do you do different kinds of ops capabilities? And then they completely ignore the bigger part of data science, which probably takes 80 to 85% of the effort of the whole AML or data
That's
science.
the hard part.
Exactly.
Getting the data in the right format.
Exactly. And then this is, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions outside. So when anybody's talking to Snowflake about that. So Snowflake, I think one of the things that I want to actually, through this channel, want to also clarify that we are a data platform, right? What we want to do is ensure that we have capabilities of capturing any kind of data, provide the right size compute to perform any kind of operations on that data, and eventually enable all the other workloads to run on top of it. What it really doesn't mean, I mean, again, from data science perspective and everything I said that, hey, we have strong partnerships, and that's the reason you would see every single workload that we support. Snowflake has its own capabilities, but we are never saying that this is the only option you have.
Sure.
Unlike some of our competition, hey, this is the best thing that you have to use. If you think about Snowflake, we would never say in any particular workload that you have to use Snowflake stored procedures to stored procedures and tasks to actually go and curate your data engineering pipelines. We have partners, we have partnerships with DBT, Coalesce, a new one that is coming through. I mean, obviously Informatica, Talent, name a product, and we would have equal amount of investments going from Snowflake, so that that option is available for the enterprises to go and pick and choose whatever works best for them. And the same thing is happening in ML space as well. So all the gaps that we have today, we would be closing these gaps, but at no point in time we would stop investing in our ML ecosystem and partners.
Got it. And it's a growing and maturing area for Snowflake. As you quite rightly mentioned, it sounded like you're describing it as a journey. You've got some bits which have been in the product since day one. They have the most maturity and the most strongest capability, I would say. And then the other aspects, those emerging aspects around app frameworks, data applications, AI, ML, that's starting to catch up now and starting to leverage off those other core components that Snowflake initially started with as a product and when it came to market. What I'd love to touch on now, and just given your, I guess, visibility across multiple clients in the region as well, where do you think people are getting, from a business value perspective, the biggest impact from using Snowflake in that AI ML space, whether that's a supporting capability or whether it's a core kind of function of Snowflake that customer's using? Any kind of use cases or success stories at a high level you'd like to share?
Sure. There are, so without obviously taking names, most of our customers that are doing, so first of all, in APJ region, because I speak to so many customers, majority of the customers are not really at a point in their AI/ML journey where they are doing this at a scale that is probably done in EMEA or
Sure.
Americas, right?
And they probably focus on like 80% that you mentioned, that bit that comes before, right? Before you can enable those analytics.
Sure. And I'm not, so irrespective of the size, even the larger ones that are actually using it to really drive their business, it's the same problem for them as well. Like that 80 to 85% of problem with data, like irrespective of their size, that is the amount of time that is spent. But the reason I mentioned that is because there is a different journey for the maturity of the customer in that space. So I speak to customers that have actually ML platform that they have custom built using containers, and they would pull the data, they would train the models. Their deployment architectures are very similar to just again pulling data into containers, using their notebooks to actually go and score the data right back into Snowflake, to a point where it is all automated data engineering kind of a pipeline that runs on a daily basis, ML ops heavy. And again, some of them are using partner products. Some of them, again, have engineered something for themselves for various different reasons. And this is where I think this whole ML space is not very similar to any other workload, right? So you can't say that there is this one product that does everything.
Sure.
This is one thing that I can tell you, that there's no product. You name a product, and then you talk to 10 people and they'll give you 5 things that don't.
Yeah, good and bad, right? Good and bad things. There's no silver bullet.
So that's where ML is a very, very interesting space, and you have to actually go and work with the customer and figure out what works best for them. So again, from use case perspective, because all of them are Snowflake customers, right? Most of them are using either partner products or they have built their own platforms. I have both these scenarios. I think if I have to again classify these customers, the ones that are engineering heavy organizations, when I say engineering heavy, like people that have products of their own and they are they're using Snowflake as a platform. More often than not, they would engineer something that works for them. They would probably not even use all open source packages. They would fork them, they would change based on their requirements. For them, dependency management is something that is of the highest priority, and they want to control everything across the environments, right? And that cannot happen if you leave it on a product. For them, it's more important that a particular model that is trained needs to go into the right training environment, needs to go into production. They control every single change that happens across these environments. And the other side is customers that are mostly end users. They want to get more value out of data science as a workload. They have data scientists, but at the same time, they have citizen data scientists within the organization, analysts that they want to use those models. They end up going more with partners, right? So they want to go and use products that provide these wider capabilities. And again, both of them, and at the end of the day, both these customers are matured kind of customers, heavy on ops capabilities. And again, they're managing it themselves, right? So one product is giving it out of the box. The other side is they're doing it themselves. From use cases perspective, pretty much everything, right? So they would use Snowflake as a platform to obviously get the data, enrich the data, perform data engineering, or data engineering kind of activities, modeling for analysts. At the same time, they would actually go and push down feature engineering. Some of them are actually creating feature stores. Now, feature stores is another level of conversation, but some of them are creating feature stores. It depends where they are also in their journey. Feature store is something that people figure out only after they are implementing some products or models over a period of time. And after a certain level of maturity, even in these mature customers, you figure out whether you need feature stores or not. So one of the customers is actually building offline feature store. They're now building online feature stores. And for the reasons because they have ML models that are integrated into their product or apps that need to actually interact with the data.
Got it. And I guess, the takeaway for me there is kind of, I guess 2 key points. One is it's where you are on that maturity curve, right, which dictates how far you're going to go all in, right, from just scratching the surface to building feature stores and having that centralized repository of those data points available to leverage. And then the second kind of key point I think is important just to highlight is there's no one tool that's going to do everything and satisfy everything for you, regardless of the use case. And that's the same as you quite rightly mentioned across all of the other workloads that Snowflake supports. You can use Snowflake, you can use other tools, and you can bring them together in a complementary fashion to get to the end game, right? So I think that's probably the 2 takeaways for me from what you've just mentioned. And I guess, Rishu, if people are new to Snowpark and they've just heard the kind of that word mentioned, they might be familiar with Snowflake or they might be working on one cloud data platforms. How would you describe Snowpark to somebody that hasn't actually used it and not really sure what it is?
No, thank you for asking that question because, again, like everything else, Snowpark is something that we talk a lot about. But I think we use this word. So first of all, Snowpark is not a product, right? It's a capability in Snowflake. It's more of a brand name that we have for a particular capability. And that capability is extensibility of language supports natively on Snowflake, right? So I think I always talk about, whenever somebody asks me what is Snowpark, I always go back and say that if you think about Snowflake almost 2.5 years ago, irrespective of how you connect to Snowflake, we used to have Python connector. We obviously had JDBC or DBC connectors. We had native connectors and BI tools. Irrespective of how you're connected to Snowflake, let's talk about Python connector as well, right? Even though you're using Python connector, you'll create a session and then you're writing SQL. If you're using a BI tool, you would drag and drop, it would write SQL for you. So whatever you're doing, you're writing SQL on the client side, and then it gets pushed onto Snowflake, and we use SQL on the server side to process the data. SQL used to be the language to interact with Snowflake. Over a period of time, we realized with all the other capabilities that were actually getting integrated into Snowflake, we now realize that, hey, we have more different kind of actors or users of Snowflake that don't necessarily work with SQL as a language. So there hence came the need of actually extending Snowflake platform to support other languages. The more important thing was to give that native experience, not to say that, hey, you have to pull the data out somewhere else just because you want to use Python, or you want to pull the data out somewhere because you know Scala as a language or Java as a language, right? So the intent here was, under this whole Snowpark umbrella, we are now supporting, as of today, Scala, Java, and Python, both on client side and server side. So from the user perspective, they are writing standard data frame operations. They would be creating stored procedures, not really stored procedures, but user-defined functions that they would otherwise do. And under the hood, Snowflake would execute them either, and all by default in distributed fashion on Snowflake side. Whenever it's required, for example, with Java and Python, we would also create a runtime environment so that we can, on the server side, when I say server side, it's those compute clusters that you would provision. They're all ephemeral in nature, so nothing runs 24/7. And on the fly, whenever you're going to call that function, we would create the environment that is required to run that function and the code that is packaged along with that particular function.
Got it. And I think you mentioned some really important points there. And because your marketing team do such a good job of promoting Snowpark, people do think it's a separate product. I often get questions from my kind of customers that go, "Oh, do we need to pay extra to get access to that?" But I think the subtle point that you articulated very well was it's a collection of capabilities that exist in Snowflake, packaged up and kind of given that name to focus on a particular kind of workload. And as you mentioned, that particular area in Snowflake over the last couple of years has expanded for those other programming languages, which is a game changer in terms of opening up that to other groups of users who wouldn't, Python users, people that are writing code in Java. It opens up and branches it out as part of that kind of data democratization conversation that you hear a lot about. But it really does that. And I think that once you're able to centralize your data and wrap the governance and controls around it in one place, to leverage it in many different ways across the organization and not to limit it to a small, isolated group of users with certain core skills, I think is really important and is definitely going to set Snowflake on a different trajectory in terms of the level of success it's going to have in terms of market penetration. We have only got about 5 minutes left, but I'd love it if you could bring it to life in terms of just showing us what some of those features might look like, and then we can maybe just take a look at that just to get a sense of how you work with that on a daily basis and what kind of things that you could do just a whistle stop tour.
So yes, Adam, I would do a very, very quick rundown of what Snowpark experience looks like, right? So this is a local Conda environment. I'm using Jupyter Notebook. It's an open source IDE. This is another big factor of Snowpark, right? Because Snowpark itself is just an API. So you can just pip install a package, and when you do that, it basically provides you ability to actually go and just interact with Snowflake.
And this is great, right, Rishu? This is an important part just for those data scientists out there to kind of get their head around, because they're probably using Jupyter Notebooks today in a variety of fashions, and they can literally hook this up into the Snowpark API, leveraging all of the kind of scalability and performance that Snowflake's great for underneath. But to them, the development experience remains the same as what they would be used to as well. They're not necessarily having to switch screens and go into Snowflake and do stuff in the UI necessarily, although you can do that. Using this approach keeps it as a nice kind of user experience that they'll be familiar with and consistent.
Absolutely. And from ops perspective as well, right? So if somebody is using PyCharm and they have hooked their PyCharm with their Git environment, they can absolutely just install Snowpark into their PyCharm environment. And that's about it. Like from there, that point onwards, it keeps all their code. Whatever way they are actually syncing with Git, right? So they don't have to change a thing to start interacting with Snowflake. And the biggest benefit here is that, because I mentioned this in a single statement, that everything is by default pushed down, which really means that you don't really have to have massive environments as well when you're interacting with data using Python as a language. And this is one of those examples, right? We are only going to talk about Python today. We can talk about Java or Scala some other time. But yeah, I mean, once you have done pip install of Snowpark, all you have to do is just import like sessions, certain data types, functions, and this step is where you're actually creating your session with Snowflake. And creation of session only involves like creating roles, users, database schema, everything that is required to interact with Snowflake. Once that is done, you can now start interacting with Snowflake after that, right? One of the biggest thing in Snowpark as an environment is that it has a Snowpark data frame experience. And it's the same as using Snowpark as a language itself. I mean, as a pandas data frame, but in a different kind of environment where your pandas data frame can mostly PySpark kind of data frame. I just don't know why this is not kind of connecting. I'm sorry. This is Okta. Sorry, my Duo is enabled here, so I need to actually approve the connection.
Yeah, all good.
There you go. So, all right, that threw me off a bit. So yes, this was Duo enabled on this particular environment. All right, getting back. So this is how you would create a session with Snowflake, and you're just creating users, roles, database schema, and everything. And after that, you can start interacting with data in Snowflake. Now, this is one of the table in Snowflake, and if you look at it, it has close to, I think, 300,000 records. Close to 300,000 records. And you have created a data frame on top of that particular table. And when you actually start interacting with this data frame, this is not like a pandas data frame. So you're no longer pulling the data into your local memory. You're just directly connecting to a particular data in Snowflake.
Okay. So the data remains where it is, Rishu, and you still get the full functionality if you were Python. Like, I'm not a Python guy, but I get the concept of data frames and using pandas as data frames. So the functionality kind of is very similar, if not the same, in terms of a user experience. But behind the scenes, you're not dragging that data out from where it lives onto your local machine or to a server or whatever. It remains in Snowflake, and you get all those advantages then of latency, performance. You're not moving data around the network anymore and all that kind of good stuff, right?
Absolutely. And it adheres to your security governance rules. When you create a session, it ensures that, let's say you have some kind of a masking policy defined, then that masking policy is also going to apply for this user. It doesn't matter which channel you take to then interact with the data set. You are now adhering to those security governance policies, right? This is one of those examples. And again, we don't have too much time to talk about this, but let's say you're doing a bit of manipulation on this data set. When I run this, you would see that there is only these 10 records that got pulled back into my local machine just because I ran .show. But this whole operation actually had a push down kind of an experience. So if I just quickly do this .explain, this actually shows what happened under the hood. So this would give you what kind of plan that was generated.
Okay, so it's actually generating the SQL behind the scenes and executing that, right?
Or the data frame experience, yes. So this is more client-side experience when you're doing data frame manipulations, and it distributes it across under the hood. But when you're doing server-side under the hood, when you're pushing down the operations using third-party packages, this is where it'll package everything into a file. We cloud pickle it, we push it down to Snowflake, and then we would just deploy it on the runtime environment in Snowflake.
Got it.
That's how you would do more complex data engineering where you're using third-party packages. One of the examples could be using GeoPandas library, and you want to calculate distance between 2 points, right? So that's
quite a common one.
Yeah, that's where we would not go and write a SQL. We would basically package the code and drop it into Snowflake, and then create a runtime environment with GeoPandas, pandas, and whatever dependency that is required to run that code.
Got it. So listen, great to check this out, and we've only scratched the surface, but I feel like we've covered a lot of the key points, and we haven't got long today to kind of give you as much value as we can in terms of putting this out there. Rishu's a busy guy, and no doubt you've got a meeting in a minute or so. But listen, I guess in terms of a flavor of Snowpark, hopefully that's given anyone that's viewing the video a really good idea of it. If they want to know more about it, or if they want to see anything else or other questions, by all means, you can comment below. If this is on YouTube, I guess they can get in touch with you, Rishu, on LinkedIn, if you're happy for people to kind of DM you if they've got any questions, and that'll be awesome. We'll do something after summer. We didn't even touch upon Streamlit. We didn't touch about native apps. So there's plenty of other kind of stuff that we could talk about. And then Any other questions, comments, anything that you want to see in the future or find out more about, then please just drop us a line or leave it in the comments and let us know. In the meantime, Rishu, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out your busy schedule to go through all of that, and some excellent kind of points that you've made in a relatively short space of time as well. So I hope that kind of benefit a lot of people.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me again.
I also wanted to let you know about our Master in Snowflake program with myself that we run, and it's an exclusive signature program to help you master Snowflake and learn how to design, implement, and scale solutions in the cloud. And I've designed this program specifically for those people who have either scratched the surface using Snowflake or who are stuck working with legacy on-premise technologies and haven't been invested in by their companies and have fallen behind in their career. And what I've done is packaged up my knowledge and experience of working with Snowflake since 2017 and learning how to package up Snowflake's out-of-the-box capabilities in a way where you can apply them in the real world to address common challenges. So this program isn't about theory. Of course, I need to introduce you to the concepts if you're new to Snowflake, and many of my members are, but it's really about introducing the theory and then in practice how you apply those in the real world. I've been through the pain of understanding what works and what doesn't. Now I've got a formula or a set of recipes, if you like, that show you how to do that. So the Master in Snowflake program includes in-depth, on-demand video course content that I've created that all include practical hands-on demos. I provide access to all the code, templates, and files that I use as part of those demos, so you can download them and use them freely. You may want to use them in your day-to-day work. You may want to take them and customize them and use them as a starting point. All members on the program get exclusive access to a members-only group where everybody can help each other out and share their knowledge and best practice and get expert advice. Finally, I also carry out a group 60-minute coaching call with all the members, totally optional, where you can ask me anything about Snowflake, data analytics, data strategy, data architecture, you name it, interview advice, and I can help you and give my input and help and support and guidance around that. Finally, you'll get lifetime access to all feature updates. Snowflake's changing and evolving. There's new features and releases every week, and you'll continue to benefit from those updates as well. At a high level, there's 10 modules. This is what we cover, everything ranging from the Snowflake architecture to getting data into Snowflake. And then once you've got data, how do you effectively use it, secure it, share it, and work with it to ensure that you get the maximum value from your Snowflake implementation. If you're interested, I've included the application link in the video description below. If this sounds like the thing that you're looking for and you want to supercharge your career, and if you're ready to take the ultimate step, I'd really encourage you to fill out the application form below.